Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to your bonus training, I guess, today. I'm going to be sharing my story with you, and it is my hope that in my sharing my story, which for me to get to this point, and you'll see when you hear my story, um, that I hope that parts of it resonate with you and that it will give you courage and an understanding of maybe how stories connect and why they're so important to share with one another. Certainly in the world today, I think our stories provide so much more understanding. When we put ourselves in someone else's shoes, I think it just helps to really help relationship building. It helps in our understanding. It gives us good morning, Barb, or good afternoon, I guess. Thanks for joining me. It just gives us a reason to connect, and human connection is just really being craved right now. But it needs to be positive and it needs to be affirming. And so sharing our stories is one of the ways that we can do that. So this may be a little bit long in that I'm going to be sharing the chapter in the book that I was published in called Women Like Me From Lost to Living. And I was showcased in this book asked to publish it along with 11 other or 10 other women. And it was quite the process that I went through to get that. And certainly when something's published, there's a little vulnerability there about who's going to read it and, all of those things. But all of that aside, I just wanted to read from it. I initially was just going to read some parts of it, but excuse me, I'm messing with my sound here. As I read it again, and I hadn't seen it for, since I published it, like almost, well, not quite a year, it was just amazing to me all the nudges that I had along the way that really summarize what all we're doing in the lives this week in our Confusion to Clarity Challenge, as well as all the things that I'm attempting to do. Hello, Patty. Thanks for joining me. All the things that I'm attempting to do in the Believe in You Academy. So it was just a good summary, I guess. My story as well as where it's led me. And, I want you to know that I struggled a lot with confidence, and you'll understand more about that as I read to you from the book. But, I've come so far, and I just don't want you to wait till you're 72 to figure it out like I did. Maybe not quite that long, but close. Figure it out now. I want you to be inspired now to take action and to really pay attention to where God is calling you. So with that, I'm going to start reading, and that will be it today. When I'm finished, I will stop reading. Thank you for those of you who are joining me live. I appreciate you so much. If you're catching this on replay, just share, comment, #replay for me so I know you've been here. And also, if there's parts of my story that resonate with you or things that that really hit you, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and share that as I go. So here we go. I've never read it out loud before or shared it in this way on a video, so it'll be a new experience for all of us. All right, so I don't even know which chapter I'm in. I think I'm in chapter 10 of this book. And it starts out with the title, of course, Someday I'll Be Okay, but Someday Never Comes. And then the subtitle is It's Not a Date on the Calendar. And every story in the book starts with a quote that's important to the author. Mine is from John Azarath, and it says, "The stories we tell ourselves shape our lives. They shape who we believe we are, and this belief translates into who we become." So with that, I'll read the chapter that I'm showcased in this book. I used to be skinny, painfully thin as a young child, and well into adulthood. I was teased, kidded, bullied, and made fun of because of it. I was very shy as a child, and my weight issues felt very isolating as I looked to others around me who didn't struggle with being skinny. If anything, their struggle was the opposite, very different from mine. I felt very alone and isolated. As a result, I often felt different, out of place, and misunderstood. Growing up as the oldest child in a family of 6 children made it hard to be noticed. There were just so many voices in the chaos, and a value that was expressed often in our home that I took into my young, tender heart was children should be seen and not heard. And so, the belief or story I told myself rather early in my formative years was that my feelings or point of view didn't matter. Everyone else came first and was more important in the scheme of things. And this was reinforced when my parents looked to me as the oldest to watch over my younger siblings when they occasionally went out for the evening. I remember being very anxious when they were gone because I felt so responsible for my siblings. I lived with much fear that something would happen to one of them during my watch, and I couldn't bear being a disappointment to my parents or not have them be pleased with my performance as their trusted caretaker. I was born a people pleaser, and pleasing people for love and acceptance was something I perfected over the course of my life. So, as a young child, not much older than my siblings, I took on the responsibility of tending to their needs and became a worried, anxious young adult with seemingly no voice to express it. I grew up feeling that I was loved conditionally. In other words, when I did what pleased, when I was good, when I was obedient. I never felt loved just for who I was or just because I existed. And again, because there were so many voices that seemed to require attention, and I was obediently silent as expected, I rarely heard, much less felt, that my folks were proud of me for who I was versus what I did. And so began my lifelong journey to put myself second, to strive hard to please, to go above and beyond, and do good things so that I would feel the love for me in what I did or in my performance. This led to the belief that if I just did enough good, that it would lead to the love and acceptance I craved so much. This all led to self-esteem issues, which also impacted my confidence and trust in myself as I move forward in my life. I struggled with low self-esteem and confidence issues for a good portion of my life. Now, I want you to understand, my parents were good parents who just happened to have lots of kids. The oldest 3 were all 2 years apart, and then the other 3 were spaced out over the course of several years. They came along 5 years, then 18 months, and then finally 11 years later. So it seemed like there were always babies in the house, and their needs were immediate, not necessarily more important. But again, I felt I should take a back seat to all the other needs going on in a very busy household. And so the story or beliefs I told myself in my youth took over. I was not important enough, or maybe just not loud enough, to be heard in the noise and chaos. And my brain did what our brains do. I looked for evidence to support this story or belief as I continued into adulthood. And so, on a subconscious level, I continued to form the belief or told myself the story that I wasn't enough. I needed to perform my way to love and acceptance. It is from that point of reference that I want to share 2 stories from something that happened in my childhood, young adulthood. I want to give you some insight into how something that doesn't seem to be such a big deal at the time can impact us for a lifetime. And it often happens without our even realizing it because of the stories we tell ourselves and how it shapes our beliefs. You will see in these two examples how my brain was seeking evidence that my story or belief supported what I believed. When I was young, my dad often introduced me to others like this. And note, it was with a great deal of pride. He said, "This is my oldest daughter, Linda. She's a little thin now, but she'll fill out." Now, as I look back, I'm certain he didn't mean for these words to make me feel badly about myself. Remember, he introduced me with love and pride. However, I took time much later in my life to revisit some of my limiting beliefs, those old stories we tell ourselves that we believe to be true, but are not. I took this to mean I'm not okay now, but someday I will be. And guess what? Someday never comes. I moved forward into adulthood with the belief or story that I told myself that I wasn't enough, that I'd be okay if I just kept trying to please, that it would come eventually, someday, with practice. And thus began my constant striving to please, to keep going forward to someday, that day that doesn't exist on the calendar, that is so elusive. And so going forward in my career life, I was continually striving to be successful someday. And I do more and to do more, to be enough and valued for who I would be someday. Now, those words from my dad hurt for a long time. It was even difficult to tell it without getting emotional for a good part of my life. Because you see, those seemingly unintentional comments weren't said to hurt me, but they came from someone I really loved, someone who I tried desperately to please. And if he didn't like the me that was before him, how and why would someone who didn't know me feel? As a result, I grew up thinking and feeling that if people knew the real me, they wouldn't like what they saw. After all, my dad, who knew me better than most, didn't like the me before him, that awkward, skinny, lacking in self-esteem little girl. Why would anyone else? I grew up subconsciously thinking that there must be something inherently wrong with me. This was another belief or story I worked on for a good part of my life. It was especially apparent when I would ultimately come up against unknowing comments of what I felt like disapproval or criticism, or worse, rejection. It affirmed and added to the evidence that I was collecting that I was not okay as I was, but I held on to the hope of someday. Another story to illustrate how I built up evidence of this belief or story I was telling myself occurred when I was a senior in high school. I was thinking about and planning for my future career. As a firstborn child and people pleaser, I was a very good student. I was dutiful, obedient, and quiet. I did what I could to get good grades to prove that I was good enough and pleasing to my parents and teachers. As I talked with my parents about wanting to go to college, my dad said to me, again, lovingly, "I don't have any money for you to go to college. I saved money for your brothers. You're just going to meet someone who will take care of you." Again, I collected more evidence of my story or belief that girls aren't important and took this to mean girls don't have the same value as men. Their opinions don't matter. It worked best to be seen, not heard. Their purpose is taking care of men and families. This was more evidence that I wasn't good enough, my voice wasn't important, and therefore I needed to keep on striving to do what pleased. Please note that raising children and taking care of families are important purposes. I don't want anyone to downplay that or think that I don't know its value. Raising responsible adults that positively impact society may be the most important job there is. However, with my upbringing and always needing to do more and be more, I thought that was what I needed to do to be the best mom for my son. As you may have determined from these two examples, I may have some daddy authority issues too. I wrapped up a lot of negative feelings about men in authority over women that also didn't serve me so well in my early career, until I went back and in effect rewrote or reframed that story to be more effective and empowering, to serve me better in my life going forward. The more important, empowering story I tell myself now is this: I owe my dad a debt of gratitude for his shaping me into the person I am today. What he intended to discourage me drove me toward getting my degree completed, almost in spite of him. And now, out of his 6 children, I am the only one who graduated and has a 4-year degree. The completion of that degree opened many doors for me as I made my way into the world of work. And left to myself, I may have given up were it not for that determination and will to please my dad that kept me going to get it done. It was also a matter of integrity for me, and I wanted to be a woman of my word. I wanted to show my dad that I could do it. And you know what? No one was prouder of me than he was for my being the first to go to college and complete a degree. And the really surprising thing, I was proud of me too. I was beginning to show myself that I was capable of achieving great things someday. So you see, I am making progress. I have gone back to these days and have, in effect, rewritten it to form a new belief or a new story. I tell myself something that serves me better and is more empowering. Things like, I may not be there yet, but in the meantime, I can always improve and be better. Or I gain confidence by taking action and learning from all my experiences, good and bad, and can take these lessons forward as I improve. Or I can toss the experience, but keep the lesson. Or, with each baby step of action I take, I continue to develop confidence and belief in myself. And now, I can talk about it without tearing up in an inspiring, positive way. You see, I discovered that our tears are often a signal that we haven't fully dealt with what's underneath, and that more healing needs to take place. And that what lies beneath the emotional pain might point to something that is preventing us from moving forward, a place of resistance or a limiting belief in ourselves that is keeping us from all we were created to be. And often, which has been true for me, we need someone outside of this experience to help us make sense of it, or be willing to do that deep internal work of really discovering what is holding us back. And many aren't willing to revisit those painful places, thinking they've dealt with it and really haven't. I know I had been guilty of that until I came to the realization over time that I was not reaching my full potential due to the belief that I would be good someday. Those beliefs or old stories I was telling myself were keeping me from being the best version of myself. These learnings have been a process, questioning what has been holding me back at different points in my life, and continuing to strive to perform at my best and learn the lessons along the way. After graduating from college with a degree in business education, I entered the workforce with some pretty shaky confidence skills. But my dogged determination to please actually came in handy. I just kept doing, performing at my best level, and eventually I was noticed for what I did. But I still had some work to do to feel that confidence and belief I had anchored to someday. Although outwardly, what I showed of myself to those outside of me seemed like I was an accomplished, confident woman, inside, I was anything but. I struggled with confidence in a huge way. My success came from just being so determined to show everyone that I could do it. Little did I realize that along the way in my journey, I was showing myself too. It was those actions I took over time that helped my confidence grow until I felt it too. But it was a process that took some time and a lot of introspection to get there. As is true for all of us, those limiting beliefs and old stories I told myself made an appearance throughout my life. Actually, they still show up. They show up as self-doubt, fear, lack of belief, fear of criticism, fear of being rejected, fear of failure, and even fear of success. But I recognize it sooner and tell myself more empowering thoughts as soon as I catch myself, because awareness is the key. We can't fix what we don't acknowledge is broken. My growing up years and taking care of my siblings led me to the teaching profession as my first job. I was always better at tending to others' needs ahead of my own, and teaching students affirmed those skills. I loved focusing on them and watching them grow in confidence as I encouraged them and breathed belief into them. Something I didn't do for myself early on in my career brought me so much fulfillment in working with my students. I ended up in human resources for most of my career. My experience included everything from employment, career counseling, supervisory training, and eventually consulting work. Once again, a perfect fit, as I could focus on others and my needs could be secondary. As I reflect on it today, I think choosing this field allowed me to feel safe. I only needed to share bits of myself because everything and everyone I dealt with had to be held in strict confidence, and the focus needed to be on those I served. There was comfort and safety in that. I was blessed and privileged to be trusted as they shared, and I needed to trust myself too, to find my authentic self, to be fully all I was created to be. In human resources, I didn't have to risk being vulnerable or share much of myself, thereby risking judgment, disapproval, or rejection throughout most of my career. My job was to listen to others and help them resolve personnel issues. I could use my silent, unassuming, observing skills to listen and learn from others, and I was blessed to be able to fully utilize one of my gifts, the gifts of encouragement. As I listened to their stories, I began to learn more about myself and my story too. When I was in my 40s, I attended a life-changing Bible study where I learned for the first time about the love God had for me, His precious child. He loved me so much, He was willing to go to the cross for me. It was life-changing. You see, I was raised in a church that did a great job of talking about the fear of God, but I missed most of the message on the love of God. We weren't discouraged from reading the Bible on our own, but didn't particularly feel encouraged either. So, for the first time in my life, I purchased my own Bible and immersed myself, being the people pleaser and good student that I was, in studying this God who created me in His image and loved and valued me so much. I learned about his unconditional love for me just because I was his child. It wasn't dependent on anything I did. That was a pretty foreign concept to this people pleaser, so I began the process of rethinking or reframing the story I had been telling myself. Obviously, this took a great deal of time. I still struggle at this point in my life with that nagging belief that people wouldn't like the real, authentic me until someday when I could do enough good to deserve it. Opening myself up to a new perspective, a new way to look at myself, brought on a renewed, more appreciated me. Perhaps someday was here, or at least it was closer than it had appeared to be so long ago. I began to realize that as a people pleaser, I was trying hard to please everyone but me. I hadn't embraced my inner, authentic self. That awkward little girl was becoming the confident woman I always wanted to be. I was out of alignment with who I authentically was because I didn't fully love her like God does. He loves me without judgment and with lots of grace. I needed to be more confident and believe in myself more, not for any one person, but for myself. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that I was looking outside myself for affirmation and acceptance, for strength and confidence, when I eventually learned it comes from within me. And it was there all the time, waiting to tap into. I was learning to trust my inner voice and my instincts. I began to appreciate that sacred place where the Holy Spirit resides, that has always and will always continue to guide me to my best life. I no longer needed to wait for someday. It's here today. Before you think I lived a beautiful life full of wisdom and prosperity from that day forward, I need to bring you back to my reality, and probably yours too. Those old stories continued to show up throughout my life. It still does. Because those old patterns, those old stories and beliefs are deeply embedded, and it took work to look for evidence of the new story I wanted to tell myself. And isn't life like that? We go along for a time where it flows, then we bump into events, people, and situations that can take us back to old ways of thinking and being in a heartbeat. And it often leads us to a place where we need to ask questions, deep, thoughtful questions about our life and how we want it to be different. So fast forward a bit for a few more examples of what the lack of confidence, self-doubt, and people-pleasing can lead to. It demonstrates what unhealed emotional pain can become. Several years back, I went through a severe bout of depression that lasted several years. It was brought on by grief, a lot of losses, not just of persons, that I experienced in a short time frame. The pain I felt the most was my only son leaving home for college. Truly, my husband and I were as excited for him and his future as we were sad for ourselves in his next exciting chapter. And we discovered that we were way better at giving roots than wings. It was difficult to close this wonderful chapter of being his mom and dad and his being at home with us all the time. In addition, I had lost a job, a couple of special people, and my role and identity as a mom and wage earner, to name just a few. I was in a negative place in my head due to fears and self-doubt again. And so the negative self-talk was playing in my head 24/7. I said things to myself that I would never say to another person. It was suggested that I go see someone to help me through the emotional healing process. It was probably one of the first times that I truly bared my soul, and I found the experience so helpful. There was joy and freedom in the releasing of some of those old stories that continued to surface. And my counselor said that grief or loss comes in many forms and just sits on our shoulders waiting to be dealt with. But it does need to be dealt with. And I learned that the practice of gratitude and journaling my thoughts were the best tools I could use for my healing. And it's a discipline that I still do most days. There is power in getting our thoughts out of our head and onto paper. So although I wouldn't want someone to learn those lessons through depression, I remind myself often to toss the experience, but keep the lesson in moving through the challenges life brings. Because I took time to explore my emotions and what my inner self was teaching me, I learned to give myself the grace and compassion I so easily and willingly give to others. I learned to be my own best friend, and I grew deeper spiritually by learning to trust God and ultimately myself for the answers that were deep within me. A more recent outcome of people pleasing and putting myself second led to a physical response versus the mental, emotional response of depression. I took on the role of leadership in a faith-based spiritual movement during a time when the organization was going through some particularly challenging times. In my attempt to please everyone except myself and get things done, I literally ran myself into a health scare. I neglected my self-care. I took care of everyone else but myself. I re-engaged with unhealthy eating habits and overeating to cope with the stress and disapproval of some in the organization who either didn't like or didn't want to change in the direction we had to go if we were to survive. I was under a great deal of stress, which I thought I was managing well, but my body was not in agreement. I ended up with AFib and congestive heart failure from neglecting to take care of myself for so long and pushing myself too far. However, this was not only a wake-up call for me, it was actually a blessing in disguise. I took time to pause and reflect as I took a more in-depth inner journey and found my true, authentic inner voice. Because I was in the close to retirement phase in my life, I asked myself questions I never found the time to ask in those busy mom years of running a household, raising my boy, and being partner in a consulting business. What are my gifts? What is my purpose? What is it I really want from my life in the time remaining? What impact do I want to make on the world? Big questions. They required finding my center, my values, and my priorities, and create a way to live my very best life with the best version of myself. You see, God was calling me higher. He loved me just as I am, but loved me enough to want more from me, and so He didn't let me stay here. In this time of a focused pause of sorts, I learned a lot of lessons that I took forward with me. I learned that I could rewrite my old stories to serve me better. I'd always believed in honest communications with others, and I needed to be honest with myself, too. I learned to make time for taking good care of my mind, body, and spirit, and learned how interconnected they are. I learned to trust my inner voice even more, to take my own advice that I often give to others. I learned, once again, that the answers to those deep questions lie within me and that I could trust my intuition. I needed to celebrate myself more, especially the small daily actions I took toward the life I wanted. I now spend time daily in quiet and gratitude to set each day off with positive intentions, and I serve others from a place of love for myself and embracing my value, which makes my relationships so much richer. I learned, finally, that someday is here. It's now. It's right where I am. So, how about you? Are you holding on to some old stories? Are you open to rewriting those chapters in your life's book to serve you better? What might happen when you decide to let an old story go? Once you've identified an old story in your life that is no longer serving you, you're able to begin to believe in a more authentic you. Ask yourself as you go on your inner journey, what would happen if I let it go and reframed it to serve me better? In my case, it helped me increase my confidence and belief in myself. It made me feel that I had so much more potential to serve from than I had ever imagined. It allowed those little girl dreams to come true because I didn't let that inner lack of confidence derail me from the person I was becoming. It made me realize that my someday was now. I accepted what was, what is, and what will be is all part of God's amazing plan for my life. Today, this inner journey of discovery that I purposefully and intentionally took has become my current chapter. I listened to that inner voice and recently launched the Believe in You Academy, where I now guide others struggling with confidence, belief, mindset issues, and bring them through a similar inner journey to their authentic selves. We work on reframing or rewriting those old stories to serve us better and take that newfound confidence and belief in themselves out to a world that needs their gifts. They too are learning to trust that inner voice and go after, with clarity and confidence, those things that bring joy, meaning, and purpose to life. They are writing some amazing future chapters as a result. It has affirmed in me the belief that we are not just human beings, we are human becomings. Your someday is here now too. You deserve it. You just need to learn it for yourself, as stated in a quote from one of my favorite childhood movies, The Wizard of Oz. You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it yourself. Glenda the Good Witch. Well, thank you for hanging in there and listening to my story. As I said earlier, I hope that it resonates with you and or parts of it, and that you find some inspiration today to reframe and rewrite some of your own old stories that aren't serving you well, but also take the courage to share it. It's not easy. It's a process that takes time, but I really encourage you to take a look at that more. And of course, I'm waiting for you if you want to set up a time to chat a little bit about the Believe in You Academy. I'd love to partner with you on that and find your authentic self too. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Share your thoughts with me in the comments below. I would appreciate it, and I'll circle back to respond to some of your questions or your thoughts. Bye for now, everyone. Have a wonderful day.